Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Off Air podcast. This time, myself, Sean Skur, and Nigel Seeger are back, and we're going to be taking a little look this time at Maystone's season so far. We are currently just over 2 weeks into the season, and we're going to be taking a little look at the Stones' first three games. Of course, Altrincham away, York at home, and Dorking Wanderers last night as well at home, an evening kickoff on the Tuesday night, 16th of August. So, going to have a little breakdown of those three games, give our thoughts, considering all three of us had a chance to commentate on each of those games. So, we'll get a commentator's perspective as well as a fan's perspective from in the stands at those games, and as well have a little preview of the upcoming Wrexham game this weekend. So, we'll kick things off by looking at, of course, the Altrincham away game, a very long away day. All three of us were there, and Sean, you were the one who commentated that game, so we'll kick things off with your perspective.
Yeah, it was a good tester, a good leveler for us to see where we are. Altrincham, similar position from us, had a few years established at National League level, and just seeing where they're going with the full-time side of things now, like we very much had sort of in the third season in National League from memory. Good early start, good early pressure. Regan with his wand, with a great set piece, getting Maidstone ahead early, very much to my surprise, as you probably heard, and the 199 of you at the far end as well, which it was a dream start and could have been even dreamier with Jack Barham crashing one off the post. We believe the keeper got a hand to it from Alti TV's highlights perspective. But regardless, Maidstone not killing off teams is probably going to be a theme we're going to have for last night potentially as well, but we'll get to that. And yeah, punished with an equaliser, some sloppy defending right before half time, and game petered out from a Maidstone perspective, I think, with Altrincham. Not enough minutes for everybody, a few tired legs. Alabi was a standout for me coming off the bench, very similar to his appearances in pre-season, just being tugged to Godham, frankly,
No pun
by
intended.
defenders. Indeed, just not being able to move, but again, holding up the ball at the same time and getting it as far away from our goal as possible. And, you know, the best form of defence is attack. He was good in that aspect. Henry Wood's got a few minutes as well. I know we'll probably talk about him as well. Mr. Golden Chance, despite Maidstone being down to 10 men and really having an opportunity to take all 3 points on several occasions in the last 20 minutes there. But yeah, a deserved point for both sides. I think Altrincham probably slightly aggrieved. But again, if you don't finish off teams when you've got your foot on their neck, then you're going to be punished. And yeah, I feel that a very well-earned point for Maidstone. And I think there'll be quite a few more battling performances between now and the end of the season on the road for Maidstone.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you did speak about a couple of keen points that have been raised, especially in the last 24 hours at the time recording this. We're currently recording this on Wednesday evening, just after the Dorking game, the day after, and everything, of course, still fresh in the minds, hence why we are recording now. And there was a few players there that he did mention who are going to be, of course, big talking points in the coming moments in this podcast. But for me, I pretty much share the same opinion as you from the Altrincham game. A game of many missed opportunities. Unfortunately, two killer chances really for Maidstone to kind of seal the game off at various points during the game. You know, we could have gone 2-0 up incredibly early on. I was very impressed by the atmosphere there. You know, of course, our first game back in the National League, Altrincham were really up for it, considering the crowd was, I think, about 1,400, which left them about 1,200 of the attendance. So yeah, I was really impressed by that. You know, decent club, now professional, of course, as you said, and definitely looking to kick on and try and build from that draw start. So, Nigel, what about yourself? Of course, me and you did stand together for a majority of the game. How did you feel about the Altrincham game?
Yeah, I think as Sean said there, we started off very well. I mean, I was standing next to you for the first part of the game, and I commented that we didn't look out of place at that level.
Mm-hmm.
It was good that we were competing, especially for the first 30 minutes. We was very much on top in the game. So from that point of view, it was pleasing. Altrincham were, like Sean says, it's their first game as a professional club, and they had the crowd behind them, so they're always going to come back into the game. I think up until their goal, we weathered it quite well. I mean, Merson made 3 outstanding saves, and that was actually mentioned on the Alty highlights as well. So, I think he used his size there, and he kept us in the game. And then really, when they went down to 10 men, although they did have a lot of the ball, I can't really recall Merton having too much to do. I know they got the offside goal at the end, which they was debating about it, but it's one of those that can go either way, and the luck went our way then. But I don't really recall them doing much after we went down to 10 men. So it was a good battling point on the road, I think.
Yeah, as you say, didn't particularly look out of place, considering the big season we had last year. Fighting right up until towards the end of the season. Of course, Altrincham with not too much to fight for, finishing roughly in the mid-table last year. So it was a big game, a big situation for Maidstone to be dropped into. Of course, with it being their first professional game, so it definitely would have been up for it. Of course, first game back to football, momentous occasion for them as a football club. And I think, given the circumstances, injuries, and the rest of it, of course, we will talk about the injuries very shortly as well. The situation with the squad. I think a point on the road, nobody could really argue with that. I mean, we travelled 5 hours, 5.5 hours to get there and back each way, and I don't think any of us come away disappointed with a point. So, yeah, I think everybody is quite impressed with that. As for the York game, of course, just over the weekend, just gone now. Like I say, almost 2 weeks into the season. Altrincham and then York at home, the first home game of the season back in the National League. I think it was about 2,200 in attendance. York brought quite a few down. And Nigel, you commentated that one, didn't you?
Yeah, it was more or less a role reversal of the Altrincham game, really. I mean, they started off very well. They got their goal in the first 10 minutes. I did at that point, looking at the lineup as well as we said about previously. It's much changed, especially defensive positions at the moment, which we'll come on to. But I did have my doubts. I thought, oh, God, we're going to be overrunning here, really. Especially when they went 1-0 up within 10 minutes. But we gradually got back into the game and had our chances. None more so than the penalty, really. From the commentary position, it looked like it was going wide before Ross did save it, but he did guess the right way and he got a hand to it. So it's debatable whether it was a goal or not for Barham, but it was going to be on target for Barham, but it wasn't. And then second half, we really ground them down, really, and then we got those 2 quick goals, and York didn't really have anything left in the tank, really. It probably would have been interesting if that penalty had gone in, really. Both managers said, that changed the game. But if we'd have scored it, would York have responded in the second half? We don't know. But I think because of the heat, the fitness of us, and we just wound them down in the end. And with the goals coming in so late in the game, they didn't really have a chance to respond. So it was a good team performance, I think, in the end. Obviously, with that little bit of magic from Deacon, who was a standout on that game. He reminded me in that game of the Deacon that we knew that played against us in the last time we was in this league. He showed glimpses of that, but that was just like that 5-10 minute spell. I think you said it in your review podcast. The ball was just like stuck to his foot, and the York players couldn't get near him, and he was getting the ball, driving into the box, and having options really as well. It was good to watch, and where we commentate from at the Gallagher, that second goal, we probably had the best view in the house, up on right behind Deacon. And it's like one of those, you can see the play opening up before you. You could see Corn making his late run into the box, which is a traditional Corn goal. And it was just brilliant, and the atmosphere, just carrying on from last year. So it just gave us so much momentum. And I think it was a good win to get as well, because it's always good to get your first home win on the board, isn't it? So, in that respect, I think, and with the weather as well, I mean, it was really hot. So
it was boiling. Yeah, it was incredibly hot on that game over the weekend. Highs of 35, I do believe it was. And as you mentioned there, the atmosphere, the home crowd massive for Maidstone last season. We did, well, that was, I think, the 15th game we won in a row at home. And me and Nigel was having a chat just before we come to the recording session, and that's 15 wins in a row. Like Nigel was telling me, that's not draws, that's not scraped wins, that's proper wins. We won 3 points every game, and a lot of them were very convincing. And to carry that on into this season was, of course, fantastic for us. And a few people were even talking to me about how good the atmosphere was in terms of the numbers that are actually there. There's 2,200 people there, but to me, it seemed like there was an incredible amount more than that, just from the noise at times during that game. And the atmosphere, when we did get up properly in the second half, is when we started to make that comeback. And the Stones engine that we saw bear fruit a lot of times last season really did carry us through in that game. And as you say, Rory Deacon, 90 minutes non-stop for me, fantastic. Really a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 performance for me. Absolutely fantastic. He got the man of the match vote in the poll that I put up on Twitter as well. So people obviously recognise that, despite not getting on the score sheet, the work that he actually put in to get those goals for the team obviously was quite standout. And Sean, I'm not sure if you were at that game or not, but of course you would have reviewed the highlights. So what do you have to say about that? Any standouts other than Deacon or Corn for you in that one?
I would have had the highlights. I would have had the delightful tones of Atkins and Seeger, of course. Great combo, if I do say so myself. But I'll put them together, so that's what happens. I will credit that. I will concentrate again a moment on Deacon, purely because we can reflect on what happened at Altrincham as well. We've already mentioned the positional issues that we have already this season, the square pegs and round holes, I think is probably the politest way to put it, because Deacon did have to get played at fullback for most of the Altrincham game and was found wanting at times, and Hoyt and he had to swap. And I think at times Altrincham just swapped their wingers just to keep the same ones pestering Deacon at times. So you could see that, I've said it in the preview, I seem to recall, that we've got players like Deacon who can cover there. But again, it's cover. It's not the first choice.
Yeah,
it's
you
one
don't
of
want to
those
play
things
him.
you can adapt to. Exactly. It's not a 24/7 100% scenario that we want to have to put ourselves in. We have a setback four, which I believe would be Jerome Williams,
Yep.
Fowler,
Yep.
Ellel, Hoyt. That would be the four. And the fact that you've got Cooley in there for all three games, you've got Deacon having to drop back in there. We've had Fowler at right back the last two games. I believe that it was down the right wing, some of it in the end. It would have been the left wing in the end. I think it was a switch ball, wasn't it, for the never knowingly undersold goal from John Lewis to be the switch of play there from the wings. But yeah, in terms of getting the best out of Deacon, it's getting him forward as part of that front three. And you get the benefit of the overlap, because if it's he making the overlapping run, as we saw last night with Fowler getting forward a lot, then you don't necessarily have the cover. So Deacon further forward is an absolute must. I did check that they linked up twice last season, did Corn and Deacon, and it was a pair of goals against Ebbsfleet, one away from home, and then the one I think we spoke about in the preview, where he took it off of another player's feet, but Deacon's ball in, and as you say, Nigel, was another on-rushing goal that Corn specialises in. But for me, yeah, Merson had a little less to do in that second half relative to Altrincham, but certainly the things he was called upon to do were done very well. Communication seemed a lot better at the back after that first 10-minute spell. Yeah, so for me, it was definitely a home performance that Maidstone have been used to. We've had a lot of situations where we've turned games round last season, and we did most of those near the end of the season. Obviously, the Hungerford game and the St Albans game are the ones that ultimately spring to mind, and I remember Nigel bringing those up in commentary as well. But it just felt like one of those moments where you know that we should be more than well equipped with the fully fit squad that we've got to get us through the rest of the season. I know it's still incredibly early to be saying things like that, but a performance like that against a fellow promoted side is really how you want to test yourself, because if 4 come up from last season, you want to be above the majority of that pack to give you a good shot at having a comfortable reasonable, hopefully boring season in the sense that, you know, things are tied up by February, March. I think we were discussing it off air earlier, Joe, you know, with the combo of results we've had already, 3 games, 1 of each kind, spoiler for Dorking. If we had that throughout the rest of the season, if you got 4 points out of 9 every time, you'd finish roughly 60 points. And that's about as good as what we achieved in, you know, the first couple of years of the 3 we had last time in the National League. So definitely take that. If certainly get a few more home wins, certainly need another 1 or 2 after last night anyway.
Yeah, well, on to home performances. Of course, it was Dorking Wanderers last night, and this is pretty much the main game I think we're going to talk about in this video, the most recent of the 3, of course, and probably the most controversial of the 3 in terms of a split fan base. I think a lot of people were expecting an incredibly tough game. I think a lot of people were expecting us to pick up 3 points against the next National League South side, one who we did trump to the title last year. And for me, it was an incredibly difficult game to commentate. I say commentate. Unfortunately, we didn't go live. If you have seen my tweets, Stone's live tweets, my Dorking video earlier, you'll understand what happened there with some of our equipment. Hopefully, we can do Wrexham at the weekend. We'll try and sort something out. But, the Dorking game was incredibly tough to watch at times. It was definitely a game for the neutral, very, very end to end. Every 10 minutes, the momentum switched. Callum was making some very good points on the recording we actually managed to do offline, which hopefully is going to be on the highlights package. There you go, there's a little confirmation from Sean there that something's added on the highlights. But yeah, Callum made some fantastic points during the game that, you know, every time somebody made just a challenge or received the ball or just someone made a sloppy pass, the momentum switched instantly. And that's all it took to tip the balance in this game at times. Every 10 minutes we calculated for the first half, it really was, as soon as the first 10 minutes was up, Maidstone took over. As soon as 21 minutes was up, Dorking took back over, and it was just that constant switch which really didn't allow anybody to settle into the game. We looked incredibly disjointed at times. You know, the midfield battle was incredibly tough to come by in that game. You know, we was doing a lot of chasing in the midfield. I think individually each of the players had quite a good game, but when you combine the 3 and what they did as a unit, it wasn't too effective at times. The defence, in terms of their ability to win their duels and things, was, for me, fantastic. I thought Joe Friol had an incredible game, really, really incredible. There was one thing that I can discredit, which was a back pass or attempt header, something like that, down the Jenko end in the first half, I think it was, for Yusuf Mersin, and it was just not brilliant. It, made Mersin come out and force a save, but besides that, faultless. Really, not a lot he could have done during that game. But it is just this disjointed thing that we've mentioned so far in the other games. Of course, Sean mentioned it about Altrincham. We got right backs playing at left back, centre backs playing at right back, new signings in the back line, new goalkeeper starting every week now from last season, and that lack of understanding at this point, something I mentioned in my Dorking review, kind of what we learned video today, was that it's going to take a lot of time to pick up where these players are going to be in terms of their out position awareness. Gavin Hoyt, you're used to him being in a certain place on the right. He's not there at the moment. No matter how much George Fowler tries to replicate it, he's not Gavin Hoyt. So it's very tough for that. We did miss a lot of chances in the game as well. Really, really tough. Couple of missed chances. Jack Barham had a pretty simple chance about 5 yards out in the first half, I think it was. Christy Patterson missed a couple of good chances as well. But we did create, there are positives to take from the game. I'll link the video for my What We've Learned video about that. But what about yourself, Sean? What do you think you got from that game?
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of positives. I know Terry put it best that we self-destructed, because that was a game that, similar to Altrincham, despite the fact we went down to, really with Altrincham, we got better once we got down to 10 men defensively, in a sense. But I think they literally, as soon as the penalty had gone in, Sam got sent off, and then after that it was a case of, this one's completely gone, we've got no chance. The period between Patterson's equaliser and the penalty being given away, there was only one team that was going to win it, but just our effectiveness in terms of chance conversion just didn't give me much faith. I think it was more likely we would hold on for a draw. The counter-attacking style of Dorking is just, a joy to watch. As you said earlier, for a neutral perspective, it was a fantastic game last night to be able to sit and just watch and not have to work on for once at my end. And it was thoroughly entertaining. Obviously, bloody annoying result, but the way Dorking set themselves up, they still hadn't got their first win at this level. Played some excellent football. They went 3-0 down at Oldham, and everybody thought they're going to hammer in. And Bobby Joe putting in two of the best left wing balls you've probably seen this side of the Pennines, and it was wonderfully done. And very well set up, Dorking, and they deserved to get the 3 points in the end, purely because Maidstone weren't taking those chances. We said about Barham's penalty saved or missed, however you want to see it, against York. Similar chances that Christie had a couple. He got himself inside on a couple of probably 2 or 3 occasions. And we've said it in the preview again, is that if he can sort out his finishing, we joked about Barham probably getting a hat-trick last night because of seeing his name everywhere. But on another night, Christie could have had at least 3 last night. He obviously bagged that header to get us back into it. And his performance as a whole really deserved that, because he run himself into ground as he always does. So for him to get a goal would have boosted his confidence, but then the overall team let down that last 15 minutes and the couple more mistakes. The defence seemed so wide apart at times, certainly for that second goal that they went in front with, and then obviously the poor back pass at the end was very disappointing. So it's individual mistakes. The team as a whole playing incredibly well. But yeah, Dorking will do very well this season, setting up like that away from home. I know Hack said that we'd need to be a bit more defensive away from home sometimes, but with the potential of some of the players that we've got, similar in setup in terms of counter-attacking style, I'd love to see us have a go at certain places and try and niggle a few people, get the odd red card here and there, and see if we can't unsettle teams and just go and hit them on the breaks. We've got enough pace, but I think it's getting Jerome back into the side, getting the fullbacks, replicating what they did last season, and just seeing how well we can break. If we don't want to change anything from last season, then we did that so often against so-called weaker teams in South. I still think the way we set up, we can easily achieve that against the majority of the teams outside the top 8, 9, 10, and do that again this season and get ourselves in that sort of middle third, hopefully.
Yeah, and again, I'd agree. It would be nice to see a little bit more emphasis put on that attacking style of play. Obviously, replicating what we saw from Dorking last night. It was really just a complete overload in that last 20, 25, 30 minutes or so. As soon as we went down to 10 men, even before that, really, the 10 minutes building up to that red card and that penalty, which we will get on to. We'll talk a bit more about some of that stuff in depth and those involved. But for me, it was just a tough game in general. What about yourself, Nigel? How are you feeling about that? Obviously, tough one to take.
Yeah, it was positive for me is Barham getting off his first goal of the season. He's obviously been playing in his mind. He missed that chance at Altrincham, missed the penalty on Saturday against York. He could quite easily be sitting on 3 goals now. So to get a goal against Dorking, hopefully that will boost his confidence. Like Sean said, Christie, I think, had a positive effect on the game, especially first half. I think he had the beating of the winger down that side, and he was getting good crosses into the box. He had a few good chances. I think he had going back to the York game, I think he had a positive effect when he came on then as well. I mean, he came on, and the other notable thing was that Barham then moved back into the centre against York. So it's like you said about the defence. Players know where their player's going to be. If Christie makes a run and crosses the ball in the box, 9 times out of 10, Jack Barham's going to be there. Whereas in the first half, wasn't necessarily where James Alabi, because he wanted the ball to his feet, and he's not getting those balls whipped into him. So again, it's just about going back to what we know, the combinations that we know, and that's what's lacking, I think, in the defence at the moment. It's not, players are not where you think they're going to be, and it's having when you're trying to chase a game, when you're trying to get back into a game, that all has an effect on it. So I think we lost that midfield battle. I mean, there was overrunning us towards that end of that second half yesterday. And when the second goal went in and the pass from Odesanya, a cross pass, and they picked it off, it was a reverse to what they had at Oldham, actually. They had
Yeah,
looked more at a pass they tried to play across, and
it did. Yeah,
Oldham
they
picked
run
them off and
straight
scored
through.
their
Yeah,
goal. So, the positives are that we're playing that. We're playing that style, which is what we're used to. But we haven't got that sort of. I mean, the Dorking would have targeted this game. That of the first three games that they've got, this would have been the one they thought, right, this is where we're going to really go for it, really get the points in the bag, and sort of make an impression. And they just seem to up for it. They seem to want it more at the end, and whether that was the fitness from Saturday coming over and the legs had gone, it certainly looked like that at the end there. It just caught up with them with the exertions of Saturday. Who knows? But I'm sure Hack and Terry will look at the videos and take positives from it and work on what we need to work on. And like Sean says, going forward, I don't think we'll have any problems. I think we've certainly settled into it. I mean, anybody would have taken 4 points from the first three games. So definitely things to build on there.
yeah. I was talking to my brother earlier actually about the points that we've picked up from the first few games, and really I was kind of expecting 3 points max really out of the first three games. So to have four, a little bit of a bonus there, and considering Wrexham at the weekend as well, really four was kind of my best case scenario coming out of these first four games. I was, obviously hopeful we could get more, but I'm quite happy with what we've done so far, and I think we're showing good signs for the rest of the season. Of course, we've got many players out injured as well. Some really key features from last year. Binnon Williams, our player of the year, Luque, the players' player of the year, the manager's player of the year. So, two crucial players missing down that left flank. But as we mentioned so far, I just want to spend 5 or so minutes between us on it. The players' performances so far, of course, Dorking last night, the main casualty out of that game really has been Henry Woods, bless him, the new boy coming in from Gillingham, of course, on loan at Dover last season. Still a young player, still potentially got the ability to turn things around. Of course, not a brilliant start from him, not too many minutes played, but unfortunately for him, hasn't impressed as much as he might have hoped to. I thought he had quite a good pre-season, but a lot of people on the forums and stuff have raised valid points that, the level of competition wasn't amazing in pre-season. So, we have to judge what we see on the pitch at the moment. And again, a valid point. But, unfortunately, you can only play what's in front of you. And he did manage to perform quite well for me in pre-season at times. But in terms of maybe the incomings and some of the players who have stood out for you so far, or maybe areas for improvement, is there anything that you two have highlighted? Because for me, I think a big talking point is that kind of holding midfielder, a more senior player, someone who's experienced in breaking up the play and, kind of disrupting midfield battles, allowing us to pick up an upper hand. And as well, another left back. For me, Rafe Brown would be a perfect fit, but his just fitness isn't reliable enough. So what about yourself, Nigel? Just a couple minutes on maybe some areas of weakness or strength, anything you want to highlight at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, really, and we've been talking about, I've been saying it for the last few years. I think we need that holding midfield player. I mean, I think we don't know what transfer activity, what players we missed out on in the summer, but obviously with Michael Phillips going, Henry Woods has come in, and people are seeing him as like a direct replacement. But we don't know what other players Hakan was after. Perhaps when Henry Woods came up, there was sort of another player in the pipeline that he had earmarked for that role. We just don't know. He's going to take time to settle in. I mean, your midfield is your engine room of the side, isn't it? And a lot of the players in there, like Dominic, Sam Corn, and Regan Booty, have played together, so they know each other's strengths and weaknesses. So it's going to be hard, but I think you've just got to trust the Hack and Terry know what they're doing. And the other thing that put the positive for me, I think, is Barham. I think he didn't really have much of a pre-season, but he's looked quite sharp in games. He has missed chances, but strikers do. But hopefully now that he's got his first goal, hopefully that will give him a bit of confidence, and we can push on with that. Corley, I think, like we've said before, he did worry me in pre-season, but I think he's come into the side and in the games in the season he's done all right. He's won most of his headers, and there's been the odd ricket in there, but then, like you say, last night Joe made that pass as well. So as outstanding as you are, when you've got a team that's pushing and putting that much pressure on you, it's going to tell in the end. It's going to be relentless, and it's just it's just bedding in. You've got to remember we're only 3 games into the season. It's 46 league games in the season. We're not, it's so much more football to be played. It's scary when you think about it, really. But I think as well. And Joe Lowell, he's not had much sort of. He was injured, wasn't he, for that Altrincham game? So it was that side kind of picked itself. So it's going to be interesting to see what Hakan and Terry do going forward. Whether they're going to sort of make that decision, whether they're going to, because if they're going to bring Vincent in at left back or whoever plays at left back, if we're going to put Gavin Hoyt over onto the right, would you drop George Fowler and have the both of them in there? He's got some decisions to make. So I think at the moment that's what sort of stood out. It's like Sean said, it's square pegs in round holes, and you're kind of picking players and then trying to fit them into a system rather than sticking with the system and putting the players into that system. So of course, Corn's going to now be out for a few games. So there's going to be decisions to make there as well, whether we do go out and get this player that's going to come in with that little bit of experience. It's going to be interesting, and in some ways, it's sort of like, is it a good thing we're playing Wrexham now? The next game up, they've just come off of the back of a 2-0 defeat, admittedly against the title rivals. They're going to see it as a good opportunity at home against a newly promoted side to, get points on the board. Will they underestimate us? We said it in our preview show how they underestimated Dover. So, it's going to be interesting. So, obviously we'll come on to that in a minute, but certainly a lot to talk about.
Okay, so Sean, of course, on to yourself now. What improvements or sort of things do you maybe want to highlight from our first 3 games in terms of the individuals we've got amongst the squad?
Well, individuals, it's sort of catch-22 with Merson in goal because he's produced some absolutely world-class saves, but we've already discussed that you have 2 number 1s at the back. That's going to happen. They're both going to pull off great saves, but the consistency at the back from last season is potentially gone, with Hadler not being between the sticks. For my money, that's partially due to Corley being in there, who has won probably about 110%, to be honest, of his headers. Certainly last night he was winning them all, and again, the odd stray ball out has really cost the team, unfortunately. He's aware of that. Woods is obviously aware of his actions as well. And again, Woods hasn't had too much time. That central midfield 3 has stayed fairly similar, or 4, I would say, because it's been a mix of Woods and Dom in with Corn and Booty. It's going to be very interesting going forward to see who replaces Corn, as Nigel's already mentioned. Will he stick with Corn for Saturday before then losing him for a game or 2 for that straight red? We've got options. It's not necessarily needing to bring someone in from the outside. It's possibly bringing somebody in from out in the cold, potentially. Bivesh Gurung is always in and around the squad. He's someone that could start. He's getting more experience as the games go by, involved in a lot of the squads and playing a lot of crucial minutes last season. Perry Andolo as well. If you want a box-to-box midfielder, Bivesh would be someone who would sit back a little bit. Perry, I feel, would do a very similar job to what Corn would do and go box-to-box. And you've seen some of the finishes that he and Dom had in pre-season, what Perry's had in previous seasons, where with Sutton Common Rovers and places like that. So there's potential from within the squad. We have a base of 4 because we forget we've sometimes got the youngsters in Bivesh and Perry that can take on these positions as well. Because if we're not able to get anyone in on a free or from the loan market, then we need to look from within the squad. If we're going to have that nucleus from last season, that nucleus is a lot bigger. There's a lot more of the squad that had some minutes. So the midfield for me will shape up, will work well with a couple of changes in there enforced because of Corn having a suspension. Up front, it will be interesting to see when we get Solwanjo Smith out there. Saw him briefly last night pre-kickoff. Seemed to be taking it all in still. And Josh Farwell was obviously unavailable last night. We'd signed him, got a few minutes at the end against York, and seemed quite well from most people I spoke with in the Manchester stand. The one thing for me is about the square pegs and round holes I mentioned previously is Fowler being caught out of position at right back because he might not have the positional awareness playing on the wing like Hoyt would have. We saw Hoyt get a few near crosses in the last 10 minutes when we were desperate and throwing everything forward. But Fowler, for me, one of the goals seemed to be caught quite far forward from an attack.
Mm-hmm.
And Dorking were very able to exploit that. So there seems to need to be an improvement in the communication at the back in terms of who's going up for corners. You're likely to get caught out if you're a goal down and you're going to send everybody except the kitchen sink up front. It was a shame that happened last night, but it's been something that's probably been sown throughout the 3 matches, this consistency of communication from the goalkeeper and a couple at the back. So I say that have the same back 5 from last season and make everything wonderful again. There were still some clangers dropped between the 5 of them as well last season, of course. Not as many, but certainly extrapolated over a 40, 42, 46 game season. There's going to be just as many as that, but it's just having the ability to counter those with our own threats. And hopefully, it'll be interesting to see who exactly they bring in on Saturday, but I'm expecting a similar setup and probably only going to a back 5 probably later on in the game. If we're still level after an hour, it might be something they consider sitting on. I'm not sure they'd look for more than a point unless there's a real chink in their Wrexham armour that they're aware of. I know I'm straying into territory we're going to talk about in a minute, but there's been a few highlights and probably just as many lowlights from the first 3 games. But I'd like to see last season defence come back in its entirety. Because I stake my claim for Haddad to be number 1 this season. And we'd also all like Jerome Billen-Williams to be fair, because he's just a lovely guy. So, but we can't have everything we want. So,
no, and again, someone actually did mention it to me on the Facebook supporters group yesterday about Perry Iandolo, however you'd like to say it. I will need to get some clarification on that, but he's definitely a player who, again, another one who showed promise in pre-season, picked up, I think, a couple goals. I know he definitely scored 1 at least. But yeah, I think he could be someone who, in a way, plays quite similar to Sam Corn, does put himself about, can run quite a lot as a young, fit player, and does like to drift forward a little bit, as we saw for Sutton Common Romers. Picked up quite a lot of goals for them whilst he was over there. So definitely an option we might be able to see. But as for the general squad, as we've all mentioned, there's been a couple areas for improvement. Maybe not even necessarily that need improving, just maybe need a bit of time, or maybe some injured players to come back, or maybe to put a little bit of faith in some unknown quantities throughout the squad. So maybe we'll see that over the coming weeks. Of course, Wrexham is going to be a game which I'm sure will try and lump as many experienced players in as possible, just because of the occasion. But in future games, you never know, we might see some of these younger squad players crop up. So talking about Wrexham, of course, let's have a little look into that game. Of course, Wrexham did lose 2-0 to Chesterfield last night, and apparently it could have been a whole lot more. Completely played off the park is kind of the attitude that I'm getting, although predominantly from Chesterfield fans, but a few Wrexham fans as well, not happy with what they were seeing at the time. And a lot of questions already being asked of that team due to a pretty slow start to the season from what they would have been expecting. So, Nigel, what about yourself? What are you thinking we're going to see? What are you hoping we're going to see at the weekend from Wrexham?
Well, I don't know. They're looking at their benches. They're in a similar situation to what we are. Apart from Elliot Lee, all their new signings were on the bench yesterday. When you think they've got a defender in Tannercliffe that was on the bench, Stan Dolby, and a signing from Southend, he was on the bench. Mendy, who's their left wing back, he was on the bench, and we've had experience of him playing against him at Boreham Wood last year when he was playing for them in the trophy game. So they've definitely got the options there to change it. They do play 3 at the back or 5 at the back, whichever way you want to do it. But their wingers do sort of bomb on. We know that's very, very much in Mendy's game to do that. I think he actually made Team of the Year last year as a left back for Boreham Wood. So they've got that experience and that pace and that quickness and the crosses. And you think you've got people like Palmer, Mullin, Elliot Lee up top. It's going to be a test. Whichever way you look at it, it's going to be a test. And I think they're player of the season in Jordan Davis, or one of their young players of the seasons anyway. Bit of a local hero up there because he's from North Wales area. He was on the bench last night. So, it is scary. I think Elliot Lee is a player that Hack's going to know about. I think he had him when he was at Luton. I think he came into the squad at Luton when he was manager there or assistant manager with John Steele. So, they're going to have them watched, and hopefully they'll come up with a game plan. I just wonder if they will go with the 3 centre-backs. If they want to play Corley, Alou and Fowler, then maybe you can bring Vincent in as a left sort of wing-back, because he apparently has got a good left foot on him and he can cross a ball. So it give you the option there with then Gary Hoyt going back on as the preferred right back. Might be a bit more cover there, but it will be interesting. It can go either. It can go either of 2 ways, can't it? They can either, going back home after that 2-0 with the crowd on their back. There's going to be a lot of pressure on them to perform. Like I said before, they're going to expect to pick up 3 points. It's a newly promoted team. It's going to be a good chance. They've got a good run of games now coming up that they would expect to get points from. So, but long as we can keep it to 0-0 or keep it tight early doors, that pressure is going to build and build and build. And if we can catch them on the break, maybe, Barham can nick a goal or Rory can nick a goal, or a set piece. If we can get a set piece and Booty can get a shot on target rather than just hitting one of the stewards, it could be. It could be interesting. If we get a goal early, the jitters will set in, and that's, I think, what our game plan should be. Really keep it tight, try and nick a goal, and then see where the game goes from there.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it already that, there's definitely an opportunity for us to nick something in that game. Wrexham have got all the expectation on them. The pressure really should be off us. Of course, coming off the back of the Dorking loss, it's still likely going to be piled on by a few people, but I personally don't really have any expectations. I think I might have said in my Dorking preview earlier, or review, sorry, what we've learned earlier. I think if we go to Wrexham and lose 1 or 2-0, but everybody has a decent game and puts 100% in, I'll be happy with that. I mean, I don't think anybody's really expecting to go to Wrexham and come away with much, really, let alone 3 points. So it will be a tough one, but we have got it in us. We've seen over the years, big games in cups, etc., against significantly, on paper, at least better teams than us. We have managed to get something from it. So you never know. It is something we could exploit there, especially their recent form. So, Sean, what about yourself? You're not going to be able to make it up to Wrexham, I do believe, but of course, you'll be hopefully tuning into a live broadcast. I'll be able to piece together, but we'll see how that one goes. But what are your expectations for the game?
Of course, I'll be there joining in, listening to a probable Mixalara. I think we've agreed on is what the outcome will be. But yeah, I'll be hiding in the jelly and ice cream. I've got a first birthday party to go to, as in a 1-year-old, not the first ever birthday party I've been to. Honest,
it's only the second.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, for me with Wrexham, I mean, you only have to look at last night's performance and the words that Phil Parkinson says. they seem very similar to what we had last night. He said they conceded 2 avoidable goals, started the game well, in control. First goal, fullback, they let them run. Because Dobra, obviously one of your favourites, Joe, did well to nick the ball off of Mark Howard and put it on a plate for Ollie Banks for the second goal. Yeah, they gave away a 2-goal head start. Wrexham, they're in the exact same position as us. There's so many teams, Dorking included. About a third of the league has won one, drawn one, lost one. Our next opponents after that, Torquay, are in that similar position as well. So they've made similar mistakes. They've got a decent enough starting lineup and they know how to play. And there's a fair amount of consistency. As you said earlier, Nigel, it's mostly the starting 11 from last season and a bench loaded with new untested toys that we can play with and deal with. So if we can hold on for quite some time and pressure them into some mistakes and let them make those mistakes, because both sides are capable of making those mistakes. We've seen that last night in both games. I was thinking, I said earlier that we'd switch to a 5-3-2 later on to try and hold on to the game, but obviously I like Nigel's approach in saying, why don't we start with a 5-3-2, because potentially then that can leave Corn out ready for that suspension service, and you then only need a couple there, because you might bring Deacon potentially into that midfield 3 as sort of a spare runner, and then have a Larby Barham or Barham Patterson as a front 2, one off the other. So it'd be very interesting, because then, as you say, we'd have to put Vincent in at left back, presumably after being left out of the last 2.5 games, essentially, and have some natural width and have Gavin, to get those fullbacks properly bombing again and pushing the team forward for the counter-attacks. Because Vincent did have a fair lick. He didn't have much space to run into, but he was definitely good at getting the ball out most of that first half against Altrincham until the goal came in, and he's sort of been locked away in a shed ever since beyond the Spitfire, frankly, and not heard much from him. But we're hoping that, if we are going to go to a back 5, it's making sure those wing backs really do use a lot of space. I'm still unsure about the back 5. I know Hakan said to me in pre-season that it will be needed on certain occasions, and I think most people have gone number 1, Wrexham away, definitely. But they're just as culpable at the back as we've been. You mentioned the Dover result last season, and they underestimate certain sides and think it's walk in the park. I hope they do the same to us. I just hope they then don't do the same to us like they did to Dover when we had Tonto at the end of March. As hilarious as our game was, that one seemed to be even worse. But yeah, hopefully we don't get Dovered by Wrexham on Saturday at the very least. I think as long as we, even if it's a couple of goal loss and it's fairly decent, lots of 6s and 7s out of 10 on the board, nothing to set the world alight, and we get, a small defeat. But yeah, they're vulnerable at the back. They make mistakes. They're just as human as our guys were last night. And I'd love to see the Welsh forums and see what they've been saying about their players. And if, having a go at the goalkeeper because he dropped a clanger and got Dobra beat him for that. So it'd be interesting to see how impatient they are, like our Kentish folk are with what we had last night. So both just as culpable. So I wouldn't say I'm confident of a draw, but I'm hopeful of one.
And I think that is an appropriate approach to have. So is there any specific result you're looking at in terms of a draw? We'll just quickly get a quick score of everybody before we wrap things up. So you said a draw, but is there a scoreline you've got in mind? 1-1. Yeah. Nigel, what about you?
Yeah, I'd say the same. 1-1. That's what I would. It may be it's heart-rolling head, but it's you've got to have that optimism, isn't it? You can't travel all that way, and think that we're going to get dicked, because you wouldn't go 20 games, would you? But I'm hopeful.
Hope it kills you, Nigel.
Yeah, but then you're saying about their forms. I did actually go on their form today, and it could be a carbon copy of our form at times. They're moaning about the keeper. I mean, I think it's the third choice keeper that was in. So it doesn't look like the first 2 are going to be back before Saturday. Will they get somebody in on loan? I don't know. But
happy days.
they're saying the same about Tozer being in the defence, that he's only in there for his long throws. As a defensive centre back, he's not having the best of times at the moment. So and then they're debating as well whether McFadzean should be on the left wing when you've got Mendy sitting on the bench. Surely you should get him in. So exactly the same. Obviously different players, different experiences, but it's the same. And that pressure, we've got 2,000 fans at Sporting Arts. They've got 10,000 fans. That 10,000 fans, that's going to be ramped up even more. We're expecting a 10,000 crowd on Saturday. So
yeah, it's going to be a tough one.
It's tough for them, but it's tough for our players as well. But then you either sink or swim in that situation, don't you? You can either inspire you or you can sink under the pressure. So I think Hack's going to find out a lot about the character of the players, because there's going to be a lot of big games coming up. I mean, you even have to look at, I know we're going to be at home, but you've got Solihull and Chesterfield coming up within the month of September. So, that Hack's going to find out a lot about the character of the players and how they respond after a defeat. And I think he'd be having them up for it. I think they've got a point to prove. So hopefully that will go in our favour and we can get a positive result.
Well, I think I'm going to follow your optimism. I don't want to disappoint anybody with a prediction, but I'm going to go a little bit more ambitious. I'm going to go with a 2-2 instead of a 1-1. I think a point will be excellent for us. I think everybody who makes that trip, hopefully there is quite a few of us, considering the rail strikes in the coming weekend. It's going to be difficult. No club coach either, so it is a make your own way sort of arrangement, but hopefully people can make their way down there. As I say, I'll be commentating in some form of another or another during the week. We will give some official announcements as to where hopefully that will be. It's looking like Mixlr, as Sean did say, a streaming website for broadcast, so that does seem to be the pick at the moment for us, but we'll see how things go. Unfortunately, Connor has also had to dip out of that game. I did mention he'll be with me during the Dorking, what we've learned I did earlier, so it does look like I'll be joined by somebody else, but yet to confirm who that'll be. But hopefully I won't be flying solo. But even if I am, I'm sure I'll cope. There'll be plenty of things to talk about at the weekend. So we'll see how that goes. And hopefully many of you can tune in. So all of us been rather boring, going for a optimistic draw in terms of the upcoming game for Wrexham. But that is our little season review so far. Of course, 3 games in, just under the 2-week mark now. And by the time we get to Wrexham, it'll be dead on 2 weeks. 4 games in, and hopefully 7 points. That'd be nice, wouldn't it, boys? Sneaky win up in north of Wales. But don't hold your breath, but hopefully we can go into that game with a little bit of optimism and a well-fought performance. So I think we're going to wrap things up here. So Sean, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
No problem.
And Nigel, of course, as well.
Thank you very much.
And that is going to be all from me. Of course, thank you all for watching the Off-Air podcast, the 3rd edition, of course, this time with a little preview of Wrexham and looking at the season so far, areas of improvement, maybe a few things that may be adjusted in the coming weeks, and how the squad's been getting on. So if you did enjoy this podcast, do be sure to check out some of the others. I'll link them at the end of the video and in the description as well. And do be sure to subscribe to the channel. Getting near 100 now. Be nice to hit that very soon. And of course, if you did like this podcast, then do like it as well. Leave your thoughts about Wrexham and the season so far in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get back to as many of you as possible if you do choose to engage, and we'll hopefully catch you in some of our upcoming videos. So thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you later.